He sits in the living room he built with his own hands, the mortgage paid, the lights warm, the smell of dinner drifting in from the kitchen. By every measure, he's succeeded. Yet somewhere behind his steady eyes lives a quiet vacancy he can't explain. He feels like a guest in his own story, useful, dependable, invisible. They told him marriage would make him whole. Instead, it hollowed him out, piece by piece. The tragedy isn't that marriage destroys men, it's that men don't notice until nothing remains. It never begins with destruction, it begins with devotion. Ask any man how he fell in love, and the story will sound the same. A sense of purpose wrapped in warmth. She admired his drive, his certainty, the spark in his eyes that made her feel safe. He thought marriage would amplify that energy, that building a life together meant multiplying strength. In the beginning, it does. Love feels like expansion. Goals shared, dreams doubled. Every sacrifice seems noble because it's for them. But marriage doesn't kill a man through catastrophe. It kills him through calibration. Each compromise is so small it looks harmless. Skip the gym tonight. She wants to talk. Take that vacation she prefers, you'll go next year. Let her make the choice. It's not worth the argument. At first, it feels generous. Proof that he's growing, maturing, becoming less selfish. And yet something subtle begins to shift. He starts measuring peace more than progress. He stops asking what he wants, because what he wants feels like a threat to the equilibrium he's responsible for maintaining. His sense of self, once clear and simple, starts dissolving into roles: husband, provider, peacemaker. He doesn't even see the erosion happening because everyone calls it love. There was a man I knew, Daniel, solid man, quiet achiever. When he married, he promised to always put his wife first. Everyone praised him. That phrase alone earned applause at the wedding. But a few years later, he wasn't the same man. His once fiery drive dulled into a polite routine. He still worked hard, but it was the kind of hard work that carries no pulse, like a treadmill that never stops but goes nowhere. He didn't notice until one evening, during an argument he didn't start, she said something that landed like a blade. "Where's the man I married?" He didn't have an answer, because that man had vanished quietly beneath years of well-intentioned surrender. Marriage hadn't destroyed him with betrayal or cruelty, it destroyed him with gratitude. Hers, his, everyone's. Gratitude that he was dependable, calm, selfless. Gratitude for the version of him that had stopped dreaming to keep the peace. That's the secret most men don't see. It's not the arguments that break you, it's the slow applause for your self-erasure. The world cheers when a man becomes what marriage expects. It stays silent when that same man forgets who he was before it began. And that silence is where destruction begins, not in rage, but in quiet compliance. The destruction of men inside marriage doesn't begin with cruelty. It begins with conditioning. A man doesn't wake up one day and decide to lose himself. He's taught that doing so is noble. From the time he's old enough to understand affection, he's rewarded for being agreeable, praised for being easy to love. He learns that his worth is measured not by how he leads, but by how well he avoids upsetting anyone. By the time he marries, that programming feels like virtue. He mistakes obedience for devotion, silence for stability, and exhaustion for love. Marriage doesn't demand this from him directly. Society does. Every story he's told, from his father's warnings to cultural scripts, praises the man who provides, protects, and persists. What no one explains is the emotional cost of constant service. When a man gives without pause, he stops receiving feedback from life. His actions stop creating consequences that teach him who he is. He becomes a machine that runs because it must, not because it chooses to. The tragedy is that he doesn't feel pain at first. He feels peace. But peace born of suppression is not calm, it's anesthesia. That's the metaphor that defines this process. Slow anesthesia. Each time he yields instead of speaking, a small part of his identity goes numb. Each time he hides a truth to protect her feelings, his nervous system learns that authenticity equals danger. Eventually his body adapts to this quiet compliance as if it's survival. It rewards him with brief moments of harmony, her smile, her affection, the fragile piece of an unspoken argument avoided. Those moments release dopamine, teaching him that comfort, not integrity, is the measure of success. It becomes a loop. the approval loop. Her emotional satisfaction becomes the metric for his worth. If she's happy, he's safe. If she's distant, he panics. This is how the male brain wires itself into dependency. The hormones that once spiked with ambition and pursuit are now chained to one person's mood, and because his brain confuses safety with significance, he loses the ability to tell the difference between peace and paralysis. Women, on the other hand, are rarely trained to lose identity for connection. Their friendships, social support, and cultural narratives encourage self-expression, even conflict. Their emotional ecosystems are plural. A man's often begins and ends with her. When he makes her his sole source of meaning, he collapses the architecture of his inner world into a single emotional pillar, one that can't carry the weight of two lives. So when that pillar shifts, the whole structure trembles. This imbalance doesn't mean women are cruel or manipulative. It means they were never taught to carry a man's emotional identity. Most don't even realize it's been handed to them. The modern marriage quietly reassigns emotional labor. She becomes the regulator of his mood, and he becomes the regulator of her peace. Both suffocate under the pressure, but only one tends to disappear because his disappearance is rewarded. Biologically, men evolved to endure discomfort, to persist through pressure without complaint. That adaptation once protected tribes and families. Now it imprisons them. In an environment where survival doesn't require endurance, that same trait mutates into emotional numbness. The hormones that once fueled conquest and competition are now triggered by domestic compliance. The warrior chemistry becomes the servant chemistry. He doesn't know this consciously. He just feels perpetually tired, vaguely resentful, and ashamed for feeling that way. There's another layer, the psychological inversion that occurs when love becomes obligation. Every time he suppresses frustration to preserve peace, his brain interprets it as self-betrayal. Self-betrayal releases cortisol, the same hormone tied to stress and loss of agency. Over time, his nervous system learns to associate marriage not with safety, but with depletion. He can't say why, but being home makes him restless. His body rebels against the role he's trapped in, even as his mind insists he should be grateful. He starts living in two realities. In one, he's the good husband, the steady provider everyone respects. In the other, he's a shadow watching his own life from the corner, unseen, unheard, unneeded except when something breaks. The dissonance grows unbearable, but he has no language for it. If he complains, he sounds ungrateful. If he withdraws, he's accused of detachment, so he becomes silent. That silence is not calm. It's a burial ground for unspoken truth, and here lies the cruel irony. The very traits that made him attractive, independence, conviction, direction, are the ones most likely to fade under marital conditioning. The more he prioritizes stability, the less he embodies the energy that drew her in. Attraction dies quietly in the absence of polarity. She begins to feel something missing, something she can't articulate. It's not affection she's lost, it's awe. The emotional charge that once defined their connection is gone, replaced by predictable devotion. He tries to fix it by doubling down, doing more, giving more, apologizing faster, performing affection like duty. But every attempt pushes her further away, not because she hates him, but because she no longer feels him. She can sense his compliance, and compliance breeds emotional flatness. Deep down, she wants to feel the man she met, the one with an inner world she couldn't completely own. The tragedy is that he thinks reclaiming her requires more sacrifice, when it actually requires less. Marriage doesn't destroy men by demanding too much. It destroys them by convincing them to stop demanding anything at all. The slow anesthesia numbs ambition, silences instinct, and teaches a man that love means disappearance. And by the time he wakes from that sedation, he realizes the truth most never say aloud. He didn't lose himself in marriage because she took him. He lost himself because he forgot he was supposed to stay. You can see the erosion long before it becomes visible. It doesn't arrive with divorce papers or explosive fights. It arrives in the pauses, the quiet hesitations before speaking, the moment he edits a sentence mid-thought because he's predicting her reaction. At first, it looks like consideration. Later, it feels like walking on eggshells. He tells himself it's maturity, but it's fear dressed as respect. The pattern unfolds predictably. In the early years, he's in what could be called the hero phase. He works harder, provides more, anticipates needs before they're spoken. Every gesture feels meaningful because he still believes love is maintained through effort. But effort without reciprocity becomes performance. He starts to carry the emotional workload for both of them, fixing moods, smoothing tension, managing her insecurities while suppressing his own. The more he tries to lead with kindness, the more he's rewarded with comfort instead of connection. Then comes the compliance phase. He stops offering opinions, not because he lacks them, but because he's learned the cost of expressing them. Disagreement no longer feels like dialogue, it feels like betrayal. He apologizes before she's even articulated what's wrong. He starts filtering every choice through a single lens. Will this upset her? His life becomes one long exercise in emotional damage control. His friends notice the change. They invite him out less because he always declines. He says he's busy, but what he really means is that he's no longer allowed to have edges. His energy belongs to someone else now. The gym membership lapses. The hobbies fade. The laughter dulls. He calls this compromise, but it's quiet extinction. And the cruelest part is that she didn't even ask for it. He offered it willingly, believing that self-sacrifice proves devotion. By the numb phase, he's efficient but hollow. His days blend into sameness. The passion that once animated him becomes maintenance mode. Bills paid, chores done, anniversaries remembered. But nothing feels alive. Sex becomes less frequent, and when it happens, it feels obligatory. He tells himself this is normal. Everyone says long-term relationships mellow out. What they don't say is that mellow often means mute. Inside, something primal rebels. He starts craving solitude, long drives, empty rooms, anything that doesn't require managing emotion. He scrolls through old photos not to remember her, but to remember himself. The man in those pictures had spark, mischief, and presence. Now he feels like a well-behaved ghost. Meanwhile, she senses the absence. Women are intuitive about emotional energy. She doesn't see neglect. She feels detachment. But instead of addressing it directly, she tests it. Maybe she picks a fight, questions his priorities, criticizes his tone. She's not always conscious of it. It's instinctive. She's trying to feel the boundaries again, to know if the man she fell for still has gravity. But he mistakes these tests for attacks and responds with more submission, trying to prove he's safe, dependable, loyal. Each surrender kills another layer of attraction. This is the moment polarity dies. She no longer feels drawn to him, she feels responsible for him. He's become too soft to challenge her and too passive to excite her. In her mind, she starts rewriting the story. Maybe he's changed. Maybe they've grown apart. Maybe love just fades. But what really faded was tension, and tension is the electricity that keeps desire alive. He feels her pull away and panics. To win her back, he intensifies the very behavior that pushed her away. More gestures, more validation, more emotional chasing. But you cannot seduce someone who pities you. Every act of reassurance digs the hole deeper. He becomes the man trying to prove worth to the woman who once saw it effortlessly. The pattern is not unique to failed marriages. It lives inside thousands of quiet homes where nobody's cheating, nobody's leaving, but both have stopped breathing. He wakes early, drives to work, provides, smiles, returns home, repeats. His life runs like a flawless routine, yet he feels like a malfunctioning soul. Underneath, he knows something sacred was traded away: his edge, his unpredictability, his internal direction. These are the traits that first pulled her in, and now they're gone. Attraction isn't about muscles or money, it's about vitality. When a man loses his inner current, everything downstream goes still. He doesn't need to become cruel or distant to reclaim it. He needs to stop living reactively. Most men think their wife's peace equals their success. In reality, it often measures their surrender. Her contentment might mean she no longer needs to fight to test his strength, but her lack of conflict is not harmony, it's apathy. There's a difference between being respected and being tolerated. Respect is rooted in polarity, in the feeling that you are your own force of nature, not her extension. Tolerance is quiet endurance. It's when she stops arguing, not because she agrees, but because she's lost interest in trying. The signs of this pattern are everywhere. The constant fatigue, the shrinking voice, the avoidance of confrontation disguised as virtue. These are not symptoms of love wearing thin, they're symptoms of self-disappearing. The man who mistakes comfort for connection eventually wakes to neither. And when he finally looks across the dinner table at the woman who once adored him, he'll see not an enemy, but a reflection of what he allowed himself to become, predictable, safe, and slowly fading from view. Every story of quiet erosion ends with one moment of unbearable clarity. It's rarely loud. Sometimes it happens in the middle of an ordinary evening, when she's scrolling her phone and he's sitting beside her, pretending not to notice the distance between them. Or when she asks a simple question with a tone that makes his stomach drop. "Why do you always look so tired?" He wants to answer, but the words die before they form, because the truth isn't fatigue, it's emptiness. He's become the man who did everything right and lost everything real. The test always arrives disguised as something small, a disagreement that shouldn't matter, a pause that lasts too long, but underneath it, something ancient stirs, the part of him that still remembers what it felt like to have edges. She challenges him, consciously or not, to see if there's any fire left. This is the turning point most men fail. They rush to apologize, to fix, to prove. They don't understand that she's not angry at what he said. She's angry that he's gone. The real argument isn't between husband and wife. It's between who he was and what he's become. If he keeps submitting, the outcome is inevitable. She grows colder, not because she wants someone new, but because she's grieving the loss of polarity. Her love turns maternal, protective, patient, detached. He feels it and mistakes it for disinterest when it's actually mourning. He can sense it every time she sighs before answering, every time she hugs him out of duty instead of desire. He tells himself it's just a phase, but he knows it isn't. The connection they once had has been replaced by management, two people politely coordinating the logistics of a life neither feels alive in. There comes a day when the silence breaks. Sometimes she leaves, sometimes she stays and withdraws behind a wall of emotional civility. Either way, the marriage ends long before it's declared over. He sits in that stillness and finally realizes the truth. He didn't lose her to another man, he lost her to the version of himself he stopped protecting. The man who once led with purpose surrendered his gravity one apology at a time, and yet that collapse, that unbearable confrontation with his own erasure, is also the beginning. The pain strips away illusion. It forces him to see that the love he thought he was preserving was built on fear, not respect. That realization burns, but it purifies. Every man must face this test eventually, to choose between comfort and aliveness, between approval and authenticity. Most fail because they confuse survival with love, but the few who endure the consequence, who stand in that emptiness and refuse to beg, begin the slow return to themselves. The first stage of awakening isn't power, it's grief. A man doesn't reclaim himself by getting angry at her or swearing off marriage. He reclaims himself by mourning the years he spent being invisible. The silence he once called peace now feels like loss. But in that loss, something essential returns. The awareness that he was never broken, only buried under too much compromise. The transformation begins quietly. With one internal decision, I will stop apologizing for existing. He starts to notice the difference between real strength and the version he performed. Real strength isn't obedience, it's presence. It's the steady, unshakable sense that your worth doesn't depend on someone else's mood. When he stops trying to regulate her emotions, he begins to feel his own again. Anger, desire, curiosity, hunger for something more than polite affection. These feelings aren't threats to the relationship, they're evidence of life returning. At first, she resists. She's used to his predictability, the safety of knowing exactly how he'll respond. When he starts setting boundaries, she tests them harder, wondering if this is another phase or a real shift. But when he holds his ground, calm, unbothered, consistent, something changes in her too. For the first time in years, she feels him. The man with conviction has returned, not as the boy seeking approval, but as the adult who knows peace can't be borrowed. It must be built. He rebuilds his structure from the inside out. Discipline replaces resentment. He stops living for harmony and starts living for integrity. That means telling the truth even when it shakes the walls a little. It means saying no without guilt. It means remembering that leadership isn't control, it's direction. A man without direction becomes dependent. A man with purpose becomes magnetic. The moment he chooses mission over management, his energy shifts. He moves differently, speaks differently, carries weight again. This isn't a transformation she can orchestrate or accelerate, it's internal, a quiet reordering of priorities. He rediscovers solitude not as punishment but as restoration. He trains again, reads again, builds again. Not to impress, not to prove, but to remember. The parts of him that once sought comfort now crave clarity. He stops trying to be understood and starts focusing on being grounded. That calm gravity becomes his new presence. He no longer reacts to emotion, he leads through it. Sometimes the marriage recovers in that shift, sometimes it doesn't. But either way, he wins something more valuable than reconciliation, self-respect. Because self-respect is the foundation of love, not the reward for it. The same woman who once seemed distant begins to look at him differently, not because he changed for her, but because he finally became unshakably himself. And if she can't meet him there, he walks away with the dignity that submission once cost him. He understands now that the purpose of marriage isn't to complete anyone, it's to reveal what was missing all along. Love was never meant to demand the death of identity. It was meant to refine it. The man who truly loves a woman doesn't dissolve into her. He stands beside her, anchored in his own direction. She doesn't need him to serve her feelings. She needs him to master his own. So he stops mistaking approval for intimacy. He stops apologizing for boundaries that keep him sane. He learns that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of truth. And when he speaks that truth, calmly, firmly, without needing her permission, the dynamic resets. Respect returns, attraction revives, and even if it doesn't, he walks through his days with quiet certainty. He's no longer chasing harmony, he is harmony. This is what masculine restoration looks like, not rebellion, not retreat, but return. The end of appeasement is not chaos, it's clarity. And clarity, once regained, never fades again. He doesn't need her to see him anymore, because for the first time in years, he finally sees himself. It always ends where it began, at the mirror. The same mirror he once avoided because it showed a man who had quietly traded conviction for compliance. But now, when he looks, he sees something else, not perfection, not victory, but presence. The lines on his face tell the story of a man who finally stopped pretending peace was found in pleasing others. What destroyed him wasn't love, but the slow erosion of self under the weight of trying to deserve it. Marriage doesn't destroy men because women are villains. It destroys men who forget who they are inside it. A structure built to refine partnership turns corrosive when one partner disappears. The tragedy is not that he gave too much. It's that he gave the wrong things. He offered devotion when what was needed was direction. He offered safety when what inspired love was strength. The irony is cruel but perfect. When a man stops chasing approval, he becomes the kind of man who earns it naturally. When he stops trying to prove worth, he embodies it. That's what women respect, what life rewards, and what marriage can only sustain when two whole people meet each other without disguise. If there's one truth worth remembering, it's this: no relationship, no vow, no title should cost you your reflection. Because the moment you lose sight of yourself, love turns into obligation, and obligation is where the spirit begins to die. So, to every man who feels small inside his own home, the answer isn't rebellion or retreat, it's remembrance. The same strength that built your life can rebuild your sense of self. The same fire that once won her heart can keep yours alive if you stop dimming it to make others comfortable. In the end, marriage doesn't destroy men. Self-abandonment does, and the cure isn't walking away, it's standing tall again. Because a man who stands in truth, even alone, will always be more whole than the man who kneels for peace.